And welcome everyone to Religion Zero number 13. Now, we don't really have much planned in terms of like a formal episode like we typically do. Everyone who's maybe followed us didn't really hear about this episode going up, at least the setup and whose channel is going to be on until, well, just this morning
Yesterday.
probably. So for those of us in the States. We've got a couple things going on for this show. If you guys kind of notice, we've got CONK, who's joined in, kind of.
Mostly. I've mostly joined in. Yeah.
Mostly joined in.
Yeah.
We've got BROOK over here, who just recently moved into his new place, so he's using his phone for the weekend until he gets his internet over the week. So for those of you who are also on this channel, 10K Run Podcast will not be on today. We're just doing this quick little stream for Religion Zero. And then we've got a little something going on with Bobby. I don't know. He wants to he hates us or something. I'm kidding. Totally kidding. No. Just kidding. But what's going on, Bobby? I know we've kind of, you're in Thailand. You're going to be coming back to the States real soon, and because of that, there's some changes that are coming. So let us know what's going on.
Yeah, well, there's lots of changes going on, actually. Firstly, it's been kind of a luxury being here overseas because I've just had a lot of time to just do things I love, make content. I've been building up my YouTube channel. But when I get back, things are going to change, obviously, because I'm going to be on the same time schedule as everybody else. And I've been, one thing I've learned, guys, I used to just shoot off at the mouth and just impulsively, make decisions and rush into things as soon as I had a conviction, which isn't always the right way to go. So over the years, I've learned to sit with things, pray things through, discern things. And basically, I've been realizing that when I get back to America, and I don't know why I didn't realize this sooner, but my normal Sunday schedule is going to actually conflict with the time of the show because I'm pretty busy in my parish. I'm pretty active on Sundays. It's kind of my one day a week to veg and just kind of chill and not lose my mind. And so that's going to be, because I know you guys do your 10K podcast. And I don't want to push the Religion Zero show to later in the evening. So now everybody else has one more thing hanging over their head for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. And then I just got pulled into a project that's going to require me to actually do a half-hour podcast 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Then I got to throw my business in on top of that during the week. And I'm just not going to have time to do it all, or at least to do it all well. And so unfortunately, I'm going to have to be a visiting guest instead of a regular panelist moving forward because I just don't have I'm just not going to have the brain cells, to be honest, just to do it well. I'm kind of a perfectionist. I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. And if I do something, I want to do it well. And I want
you got the brain cells. I think it's just the scheduling. I think you
that too. Well, and I'll be honest, even here in Thailand, cause it's nighttime when I do the show now, it's 9:10 right now. And the last few shows, I've been kind of running on fumes, to be honest. That's why we had a bit of a delay last week. You'd ask me a question. I had the little Fox News delay, because I had to buy myself time, to think of what I should say back. No, I'm just kidding. But
so the secrets of the industry, right?
Exactly, right. So
you've all learned something.
This is kind of my farewell show. Not a total farewell, but a farewell as a regular panelist, because I won't be able to do it every week going forward.
I was going to say, we'll have to have you send questions in or something, email them in.
But I will say this, though. I hope that my presence on the show, well, number one, I want to thank you guys just, for thinking enough of me to even, put your trust in me to invite me into your little circle here as a panelist. That's number one. But number two, I hope we were able to demonstrate to everybody that, you know what, you don't have to be clones to make a show work. You don't have to be an echo chamber. You don't have to fake it and act like you guys agree on everything. I mean, we pretty much rarely agreed on a lot of stuff. But you know what? We proved that in this day and age, the lost art of being a scholar and a gentleman with something that you don't agree on, it's still doable, guys. And I got to tell you that the thing I'm going to miss most about being on the show is what you guys don't see. Like, I'm going to miss the pre-show. I'm going to miss the post-show when we're just clowning around off the air. Just the horribly, just the horrible, unpolitically correct jokes that we tell. I'm just going to miss it. And Amos, I got to say, about 3 weeks ago, Amos came like this close to repeating one of the things we said during the meeting. We're like, no.
I'm trying to remember what that is. I say so much non-politically correct stuff. It
had to do with The Rock. That's all. It was when the Ryan Stone show, when we had Ryan Stone on. The little joke I made about The Rock and something else that is kind of, well, I'll remind you guys out there.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, please.
It doesn't. Yeah.
So Bobby, what you're trying to say is that you don't think we're alt-right Nazis, because that's what I always hear is if we disagree, then that's what somebody is. Somebody's got to claim it, right?
Exactly. You guys are not racist.
Whoa!
It's
very refreshing to hear, Bobby.
It's not racist because you don't see things the way I want you to see things.
You got to get like a glass of water and just...
Yeah, exactly. Aspersion, we call it.
Get that sprinkling.
Exactly.
Get the incense going around. I think it was definitely awesome having Bobby on. And yeah, it's because I'll have conversations with Brooke. And we'll disagree on things, but it's very rare. I think like on our whole podcast, we had maybe I could probably count on one hand how many episodes where we had like a full on debate about something. And those were fun nonetheless. But it was like we didn't really have like real things where we could really get into like a real disagreement basically, and kind of really challenge sort of the typical idea of like, oh, we're just best buddies having a little chat, but like that's the thing is we could still be like cool with each other, still be buddies, just like being getting to know CONK and Bobby, and we haven't even met in person yet, so
I know, right? And I gotta say too, an opinion worth having is an opinion worth defending. And like everything in life, unless it has regular resistance training, it's going to atrophy.
Mm-hmm.
You use it or lose it, So if you're not in the regular habit of kind of defending your opinion, sooner or later you're not going to have one, or you're not going to have one that you can, really believe in, because it's got to be tested, man.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're going to get another Catholic, guys.
Yeah.
We'll get Tom on. We'll call Tom and see if he's busy.
Yeah, we'll have sign up sheets. How much can you look and act exactly like Bobby? We'll just have like a stunt double from now on as our fourth seat.
And here's the thing, guys. I'll make it when I can. There'll be times where I could, I might have to call in from the car because I'll be on the way home from mass. But
that'd be cool.
But yeah. I'll definitely.
Hey, first time caller.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm like the guy that was kicked out of his house that has to come visit. Has to let himself in, has to ring the doorbell to the house he pays the mortgage on every month.
Bobby, man, I was just saying before the show, man, you've been an absolute champion, a real good sport. And we want this to be an interesting show, and we don't want it to just be a yes man show. So we always love the different opinions, and I would kind of go out of my way to spice things up, and because we want to see those differences. We want to know it's okay. We could get along, and even if we don't have all the theologies the same, we're all brothers in this whole thing. And you, my friend, are my brother. You're family to this group and to us. And the whole, all of us in this, we got to meet up at some point.
Absolutely.
If I'm coming across there or you're coming across to the UK, and this is for anybody out here who might want to meet up, we'll go and have a beer, and we'll just get to know each other better, man. So thank you so much for joining us on the show, man. You're just absolute champion in my book.
Likewise, brother. Takes a champion to know one, my friend. I'm glad you guys invited me on for sure, man.
Yeah.
You'll be missed.
I was gonna say, Bobby, for me, it was great having you on. And it was really obvious, you brought your Catholic point of view and your ministry experience. But I think it was also really interesting So me personally, I study a lot of like the actual Bible and the early church, and then I studied a lot of today. But you're also really good at finding all of the guys that led up to today, right? You're like a walking Wikipedia article between 30 AD and the 2000s, and that's something I don't study that much because I wasn't there. I don't care, kind of thing. But you were very good at pointing out like how we got there, if that makes sense. And so I really appreciate your voice, especially when you were bringing up like old early church fathers or books that might have been written 200 300 years ago, talking about those points of views and being able to connect those to both the biblical times and today times. I thought that was really awesome and very well needed.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, to me they're evergreen truths. Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I gotta say, man, it takes a lot of just faith, man, to just hang on to these principles, these invisible supernatural principles that just seem like they're non-existent because they're so invisible at times, and they're so abstract at times in this like materialist culture we live in. And when I say materialist, I'm not talking about people who shop till they drop. I'm saying the classic sense of materialism, which a lot of people confuse with consumerism. Like, oh, you're so materialistic, you want to have the latest car. That's actually consumerism. The materialism I'm talking about is materialism where we don't really think beyond what we can experience with our senses, right? We don't think much of the abstract. Whereas Aquinas would say that, the material world is what bears a resemblance to the spiritual world, not the other way around. Like the visible realities that we see is actually the reflection, not the mirror, if that makes sense. Correct. So yeah, it's hard to, all these old school principles, whether it be about chastity, whether it be about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, the existence of hell. It's so easy to just dismiss those things and just, like St. Paul said, let our God be our belly, and just dedicate our existence to maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain, and it's really challenging at times.
Absolutely. Well said. Said.
Thank you.
So are you sticking around for the show? What's going on, Bobby? When are you heading out?
Yeah, I could probably stick around for maybe another 30, maybe 45 minutes.
All right, awesome.
For sure.
I mean, I can't because for those who don't know, I'm running on my phone at the minute and I've got like limited data. So yeah, I just wanted to come on and wish my brother Bobby all the best in everything that he's doing. And you guys have a great show, man. I'll be watching in the comments. I'll be in the chat. But yeah, I got to conserve data because I have until Wednesday before this engineer shows up. So I got 4 more days.
Boo. I'll be seeing you.
I love you, bro, man.
Love you too, man.
We'll do like a tribute episode with you one day, man.
I feel like we're doing a Monday Night Raw after a WrestleMania when like Ric Flair retired or something.
Oh, nice, man. We never even got to discuss the wrestling, man. We got so much to catch up on.
I was gonna say we gotta get a compilation video and get like from the arms of an angel.
Oh no, we're gonna get copy strikes. I mean, if you were good at singing, we would probably get copy strikes, but that was unidentifiable, so I think we're good.
Yeah, we gotta stay on Sarah McLachlan's good side, dude. This ain't a shelter dog infomercial.
If you donate just $1 a month, you could help Bobby come home. He's been stuck in Thailand way too long.
Oh my gosh.
Oh man. All right, awesome guys. I'll be watching in the chat. Bro, I love you, man. And I'll see you soon, brother. Hopefully, Take care, guys.
We'll see you, Brooke.
That's great. Well, I think well, now that Brooke's gone, now we can do the real evil plan. But I think we talked about doing some open Q&A instead of any specific topic. So I mean, I think we're planning on throwing the link out.
What they want us to really talk about. So everyone in the chat, I think we've got Carl, Tom, and Heather, and obviously Brooke as well. Once he's going out into there. So I mean, we've done 12 episodes. We've talked about everything from heaven and hell to religion and such.
We even got into the A word last week.
The A word.
Abortion.
Asshole?
Oh. Applebee's. I'm pretty sure he meant Applebee's. The number one evil in America.
Applebee's.
We were having a good conversation about Applebee's until Karen came along and broke it up.
Yeah.
That's where all the Karens go, is Applebee's. Which actually reminds me of Talladega Nights. You had Applebee's and his pet tiger Karen in the same movie.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I guess we could touch on that if you really, really want to.
Yeah. This is hypothetically the Bobby show. We'll let Bobby pick if he's got it.
See, what would we touch on?
Well, you said the abortion. So, the show got striked. No,
oh, man.
But what did we get onto? I know it's like, I think the big thing was, what to do with government when it comes to that thing. I mean, that gets into the political realm, I think.
Yeah.
Which is why it's like I think, I mean, most people that I've talked to about the topic will say, oh yeah, if something happens, push comes to shove, they're gonna keep the kid. They're not gonna really, unless there's like very extenuating circumstances to kind of like go through with an abortion, all that. But even among Christians for sure have a sense of like, obviously, like preservation of life, and they just sort of the instinctual answers. So if you like accidentally got pregnant, I keep it. Like they kind of go with that. There's enough moral weight among those who are Christians, but when it comes to the state, that's where it's like, okay, I think. I'm a libertarian, Brooke's a libertarian, and we're really into like just thinking about how like, okay, the state should have no say in like moral issues, like the whole thing with gay marriage and all this stuff. It's not really a matter of if we necessarily agree or not, but it has to do with, we don't think the state has any say. It shouldn't be messing around. Like true like separation of church and state was not really just that the state. It was not just the church staying out of the state, but the state staying out of the church. It goes both ways on it. So when it comes to these issues that are so controversial and stuff, it's like, in the society that we're in, and trying to kind of control it one way or the other, and then the whole argument of, Brooks saying it would have been his topic, but I just think. Like, yeah, you make your own decision, and definitely, like, I think there absolutely should be education and encouragement to like, for people to really consider the options. Obviously, practicing, if not abstinence, say sex, things like that. Definitely limit the need for that to kind of, the need or the demand, I should say, of that happening. But at the same time, I'm not going to use the state to enforce my beliefs one way or the other, because in a practical sense, as much as it can, you want to kind of like look at things and go and say, okay, this is what's right or this is what's not right. Pragmatically, when you enforce law, you enforce a pro-life idea on the state level, and just in a law-abiding way. You got countries, I think it was Colombia. There's some countries in Latin America, basically Latin America, that have turned in such a way where they have essentially what would be considered inquisitions into miscarriages, botched abortions, and such, and they kind of treat it a lot like, if you had a miscarriage, they will investigate the hell out of you, trying to charge you with abortion. And then also because it's illegal, you have this way higher rate of botched abortions. So instead of the risk of then killing, what Christians will believe is, well, you kill the kid. Okay, not only would you be killing the kid, but also, excuse me, killing all those mothers too. Like if you want to limit
hypothetically. Right.
It sucks that we have to discuss it that way. I'm thinking of it in the numbers way is you're not only killing all these potential lives, you're also killing all these mothers too.
I think that's would be like kind of like the fallacy of making the exception the rule, though. It's kind of like when I hear that, it almost reminds me of people saying we should abolish the death penalty because of the rare instances of people being wrongly convicted. Like, yeah, there are wrongful convictions on death row, but my thing is this: like, I'm in a good mood, so I'm going to work pro bono for the devil tonight. I'm feeling really generous. I'm going to be his advocate, real quick. With what he said. I'll
his legal attorney.
I'll never understand that phrase. Like, why does the devil need our help? Like, why does he need an advocate? But I'll give it to him anyway. So here's the thing. It's kind of like this. The government is supposed to be in the business of legislating morality when it comes to equal protection under the law. That is the government's job. So, like, let me give you an example. You hear a lot of the abortionists that say, keep your laws off my ovaries, right? Laws, it's unjust and it's tyrannical and it's patriarchal for a government entity to regulate what I can and can't do with my reproductive organs. That's the classic feminist, argument right from the 60s, right? Well, what would stop men from turning around and saying, well, I think it's matriarchal legislation to have anti-rape laws? Isn't that enforcing what I can and can't do with my reproductive organs? Like, keep your laws off my male.
When we're debating when we're getting into the idea of personhood, you're talking about one and another non-consenting, fully grown adult.
Not true. It's actually the same thing. And here's why. The only reason I bring up anti-rape laws as an example is because those are laws that are specifically designed to restrict somebody's freedom with what they can do with their reproductive organs in service of protecting another human being. That's the same reason why us Catholics believe that laws should be enforcing anti-abortion laws, because you do, in a sense, you have to restrict people's freedom to live in a just and civilized society to a degree. Like, if I were to start, if I
to a degree.
Well, yeah, think about it. Like, if I saw somebody trying to rape a woman and I intervened, I white knighted, or let's say somebody's trying to kidnap a kid. Well, I'm imposing my morality on the rapist. I'm imposing my morality on the kidnapper. Why? Because I have to defend an innocent person. We're talking about, like, so we're looking at the numbers, looking at the effects. Mm-hmm. Rape is an obvious, like, it's a breach of someone else's freedom to live too. It's not just, I get to use my reproductive organs and so my freedoms are preserved. No, you're now infringing upon their freedom to basically live free of your decision. And I would say the same thing about that unborn baby. It's like the old saying, my freedom to swing my fist ends where your nose begins. So yes, we do have freedom, but we have limited freedom when it comes to the rights of others. The unborn should receive those rights.
So here's because that realm gets, this is where I was talking about, like, countries that have this, and then the botched abortions, and then the inquisitions into miscarriages. Let's say you get married, you have a wife, and you go through the whole process of having a kid, and let's just say she doesn't quite have the best. Every woman, from my understanding, will have some sort of issue when it comes to children. Whether it's not really a problem of, like, whether or not she can have a kid, but more so like the process of getting to the point of, like, actually coming, having a child to term, conceived, coming to term, being born, and the whole thing. There's a lot of stuff that can happen with diet, with health. Some women have to get certain injections and stuff. Mm-hmm. So, let's say I mean, so you do have people in this country who are, are not very responsible with their reproductive practices, and they just, popping out kids like crazy. And that sense of irresponsibility, not so much to having kids, but let's say because they they kind of carelessly have sex and so on, and then they have kids, but also in that carelessness bleeds into other parts of their lives. And so let's say they are eating very poorly.
I mean, so let me ask you this.
So if you're not taking care of yourself, and as a result, you have a miscarriage, and let's say statistically, because of what you were doing, medical studies will actually show, because you were eating this poor diet, your risk of having a miscarriage is this much higher. And then let's say you literally just became a statistic with your practices.
Also, substance abuse is involved in there a lot too.
Yeah. And CONK is familiar with that too, with his work. So should we then put in laws to then enforce what women do with their body to the level of what they eat and what they do when they're pregnant? Monthly pregnancy checks, mandated by the government to make sure they're taking care of themselves. And if there's a miscarriage, in-depth study into whether or not they actually did the right thing. Did you get the injections? Were you monitoring the pregnancy? Did you know you were pregnant? How irresponsible is that? We should prosecute you, because that's just as bad as an abortion, because you weren't taking care of yourself.
Yeah, and I could see why you're saying that, but to me, that just sounds like you're setting up kind of like a phantom totalitarianism that didn't exist prior to Roe versus Wade, by the way. If everything you're saying is true, where was all this totalitarian, all this...
Well, we definitely have a culture. This is the thing. There's a huge cultural shift right now we have towards abortion. It's such a part of our society that it's just culturally essentially. I mean, not only is it culturally debated, and it's such a touchy issue even today, so many years after Roe v. Wade. And I will agree with you in the terms of when you look at the Roe v. Wade argument and you look at what happened. First off, the founding fathers had no idea would have no idea what that really was. Did they have abortions back in the days of the founding fathers? Probably something, but it was nowhere near what it is today. And to argue it under the right of privacy just seems like a real stretch. To make it constitutional, I can agree at least that Roe v. Wade, in terms of arguing the constitutionality of abortion, was kind of weird. But that where we are right now, without completely radically altering our society, where we're going to have again those problems, if we go down the route of these pro-life, anti-abortion side, I mean, just think of it this way: any time the U.S. in its history has basically started to slowly breach freedoms, slowly breach telling people how to live their lives, and inevitably over centuries completely changes from where it was. So, for example, freedom of speech. Now we have certain things like libel and defamation laws. We have laws against a call to action. We've got all these things that are interpreted into the First Amendment. Rightly so. We had to kind of re-examine, the Supreme Court has to look at these issues where, here's different ways speech can be used. The expression of speech, whether not just in the verbal and written sense, but also in media, in our daily lives, different ways to protest, having those protected. Second Amendment rights. The absolute right to bear arms back in the beginning of our country was you could own battleships and militias and whole entire stockpiles of essentially weapons of war. If that were applied in the same way today, you would have a handful of people that are, obviously there might be something in place to kind of keep that in control, but you might have a handful of private individuals that would own tanks, turrets, self-defense, systems to defend themselves. You might even have a couple of individuals who could actually afford to maybe make their own nukes. This is kind of the libertarian, hypothetical situation, but not to advocate for that per se, but here we are. We've already kind of made these changes. Roe v. Wade has been around since, what was it, the 70s?
73, going on 50 years.
Yeah. So there's that. So once we go down a different direction, whether it's this sort of pro-choice essentially or pro-life, either path I think is going to lead down 100, 200 years down the road to morally go into a whole different direction that even Roe v. Wade wouldn't have intended, and a lot of the abortion that I just think government in general, don't touch it. People make their own decisions.
Two things to that. And okay, so first thing is, I noticed you use the word freedom a few times. What you mean by freedom, I mean, we have to make the distinction between freedom and license, okay? And like Pope St. John Paul II used to say, the true definition of freedom is not the ability to do what you want to do. That's the more worldly definition. That's the more materialistic, more secular definition. True, authentic freedom is the ability to do what you ought to do, right? That's what true freedom is from the biblical perspective. So that's one issue, is freedom versus license. The other issue is this. Let's say that all your totalitarian fears are true, that there's going to be these Eucharist commissions that are set up every month, and that all these terrible things you're saying are true. Does that let us off the hook from protecting the unborn? Because to me, this isn't just about breaking up the fun in people's bedroom. To me, this is protecting human beings who are the weakest members of society, who have no one to stand up for them. They can't even stand up for themselves. So let me say this real quick. So there were lots of fears in the country. Because see, I consider myself a modern day abolitionist, right? So in the old school days of abolition, there were lots of people raising fears about what would happen if we abolish slavery. Well, they're going to be sold on the black market. They're going to be killing people over slaves. They're going to be, slaves are going to be much more expensive now if we make it illegal, because they're going to be sold on the black market to the highest bidder. So there were all these phantom scenarios that were set up, but that still didn't minimize the conviction of the abolitionists to say the right thing to protect human beings. They're not free.
Right. I get that. So here's another way to look at the problem with slavery then. If the U.S. government never intervened and stepped in, there wasn't a whole civil war over it, and the states were just let to do their own thing, or even, let's just say hypothetically, not that I'm advocating or condoning this to happen. I got to be clear on that so people don't take this the wrong way. If the South won the war, and there were two countries on this continent, well, three if you include Canada, but they don't matter.
Hey, we just let them think they're a country.
Right. Excuse me. So when you look into this and you slavery was surprisingly in a very inefficient system towards the end of it. And for the state to step in and essentially, bring in the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and then, of course, leading up to the Civil Rights Movement and all this such with, affirmative action and equal opportunity and all this stuff. We can agree, if you really look into a lot of this, there's a lot of problems that have come from that sort of unintended consequences. While the intentions were we're going to ban slavery, we're going to, basically people have to be hired for different, more different reasons. They can't be discriminated against for these reasons. What it's basically turned into was, where we are right now. We still have racial tensions and all this stuff, and, on the verge of possibly some other racial problems. But if, let's say, the states didn't really do anything about it, and then there was the Confederate States, or if just there wasn't a war to begin with, economically speaking, slavery would just kind of go away on its own because of just people in general. You would have your abolitionists that would eventually gain in their sort of their popularity of hey, it's wrong to hurt people. We have better ways to actually get the work done. The cotton gin, just there's a whole different ways we can think about farming, going about just menial work. It's kind of the same thing right now. I mean, not the same thing, but, the fear right now is automation. What are we going to do with all the people that work these jobs? McDonald's employees, truck drivers, it's not the same as slavery, but economically, those jobs are going to be automated. Just like in the same way back then, economically, systems and inventions came in place that slavery just didn't really have to exist, because it just you'd be spent like the again, numbers. The upkeep and maintenance of a slave is way higher than a machine.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can go out there, one or two, a handful of people at a farm with tractors and some equipment, go out there and do all the work. You don't need slaves because it's just economically not viable.
But my thing is this, though. Guys like Marcus Garvey and Abraham Lincoln and all these abolitionists, the furthest thing from their minds was the economic unviability of slavery. They wanted to.
I know. So I'm saying is these. So what I'm getting at is, do we want to go down a path where the state is forced to confront these issues in a way that can cause a lot of, while intentions might be good, the consequences down decades, if not centuries, are going to be so profound that it radically alters the way we go about it, where maybe it leads to more problems, maybe it leads to less, but then creates whole new problems? Or do we just, like I'm saying, is just the government doesn't touch it, and then eventually people have more of the ability to basically not have to get abortions, because abortions are such a thing that, let's say artificial wombs, more surefire ways of birth control, so you don't because it's right now it is essentially
that we're bound to take. Like, in other words, if you got to save a human life, to me it's kind of like this. What if I see somebody in a burning building and I'm the only one who could run in and save them? The fire department's way, nobody else is around to save them. That's a risk I'm willing to take to save that person. We'll multiply that by all these babies that need saving. Sometimes you got to risk things to save an innocent human life. And all I've heard from you so far is just all you're assessing are the risks and why we shouldn't risk ourselves or risk whatever you think is at risk to save innocent human life.
Because knowing how a lot of these things can pan out when we start to institute laws and controls on morality, which I think is completely different than saving somebody from a burning building. I think it's like you're stepping in a way where the interference is going to cause like I said, you have this slippery slope of, do you want these pro-life inquisitions, or do you want, that's one way. This is the thinking is, either you're going to go the pro-choice route and basically you allow, this is the two directions. Either we allow the government to step in and basically allow people the freedom of choice. So we start to legislate the pro-choice side. So the government is essentially, according to a huge part of the population, is condoning what they define as murder, right?
Yeah.
Or you have the other side. The government now condones inquisitions into abortions, miscarriages, accidental situations.
I just don't see that.
Do you want to? But that's the thing. Here we are, 270, 280 years after 1776. Do we have the freedoms we had back then? Our most fundamental freedoms of speech, of the right to bear arms, the right, the ability to just be free Americans are so limited to the point.
And I would argue that all those freedoms were taken away by the left over the last 200 years. And the left are the ones that are keeping the boot.
It wasn't always the left, though. It's not so much about the left or the right. In my opinion, it's more so about who's for or against freedom. Libertarians tend to kind of span across an entire spectrum, a lot that encompass the left and the right. But it comes down to is, you live the way that you want to live, and the government shouldn't be used to have its will enforced upon you because of whatever is voted into power, or whoever is voted into power.
So let me cut right to the heart of the matter then. Do you believe that every citizen deserves equal protection under the law, that every segment of society?
Yes.
Whether they're in utero or not?
This is the defining line. I personally make decisions in my life to the preservation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's as much as I feel I can rightfully am entitled to defend. I defend myself and the people in my life. Now, and the beliefs that I believe that I can do that are limited to my decisions. Now, if a group of people and I decide, well, we want this to be across the board, there can be there are those that are definitely like murder, anti-rape, all these things. Those are clearly defined because we've as a society, we've ethically decided it's a pretty bad thing when people infringe upon each other's freedoms by ending their lives, traumatizing them for life, forcing them, this
as long as that life is not in utero, though, because we're talking about murder when we're talking about abortion. Why does that not apply to the unborn? What you just said, why does that not apply to the unborn?
Because of the way it is being done right now. It's so, I'm saying that this is where you have to go the pragmatic side, where either, like I said, either you stop it and you have botched abortions and inquisitions where people are being thrown into jail for having miscarriages, or the other side, then you have the government condone this, what you would define, what Christians define as murder. There is moral weight. I'm not disagreeing with that, and it's not something that I'm just like, oh yeah, just go get an abortion. But in this, where we are right now, for how common it's being done, to just completely to put such a halt to it, I would cause so many more consequences than it would hope to undo.
But it would save so many lives, though. It would save at least 1 million lives a year.
So then it would kill 500,000 other lives, or maybe it would kill back alley abortions, botched abortions.
I know.
And then here's the thing: it would throw a lot of people in jail too. So here's the thing: it would throw the.
You're not going to jail for murder.
So it would throw the doctors in jail for things. It would throw nurses in jail. It would throw
abortion doctors are hired hitmen, man. They're hired hitmen.
We already have a majority, like a huge chunk of the world's population in jail.
If you watch the Gosnell movie of Kermit Gosnell,
right,
the butcher they used to call him, every abortion, he's no different from every abortion doctor. He's just the only one that was outed and videotaped. But all abortion doctors are Kermit Gosnells. They all deserve to be in jail. Because there's a reason why it's called the penitentiary, because that's where you do penance.
So I want to touch on some of the things in the chat here. By the way, I just realized we haven't had CONK talk at all. Hey, CONK.
Yeah, CONK's been kind of conked out over there.
Yeah, I'm just getting my quick Z's in before it's my turn to speak. But yeah.
So you said you doubt slavery would phase out because it's still applied today. American prisoners and American sweatshops are a big chunk of the workforce for the American goods.
Yeah.
So, I mean, sweatshops are still paid, though.
Yeah, a quarter for a 12-hour workday.
So, I mean, essentially, when you look
that's slavery.
Yeah. No. When you look at when you look at the, I mean, this is again, you want to go look into. There's economists that have looked into the whole sweatshop thing, and people like Americans, specifically a lot of your like left-leaning SJW Americans are like, well, people in Korea or people in China, they need to be paid more like we do. They need these rights and freedoms to take care of themselves. And people will be like, yeah, totally. But here's the problem: is it's a developmental phase. Like every country goes through different phases. Who was there to defend Americans during the Industrial Revolution when we used child labor and had extremely dangerous work conditions?
You don't want me to go in on Industrial Revolution. That'll be a 2-hour show added on.
But I mean, this is the thing: is who was the first world Big Daddy nation to come in and say, hey, these Americans really work hard and they deserve the same protections and wages as we do. No one did, because we had to go through that to eventually come to a point where now that's happening in other countries. We had to work our way into a point economically where we are now the most prosperous nation in the world, right? So every country goes through that, because once they get into industry, once we start buying and selling goods through them, they're accumulating wealth in a way that is going to eventually lead to them becoming like in America, whether it's in the world or in their region, to then nations develop in these phases where they get into an industrial sort of revolution of their own, to then move on to, developing in a way where they make, now they're, whether, and then of course, what is the whole thing? Where do we eventually go when all the countries are developed? Well, we have automation then. We eventually get to a point where the world is different from how it goes about creating goods and services.
Yeah.
We've figured it out to go, let's just have other countries that are poorer than us work for us.
Yeah.
And in the same way, you were saying, because slavery, you doubt slavery would phase out. Now, and it's funny that you bring that up. Like,
well, I mean, we still like slavery, because I brought that up originally, because that's before we were like comparing abortion to slavery. Like, it has all these numbers, but is it a moral issue or is it an economic issue and things like that? And I mean, I think Tom Bombadil was saying, well, it would have been phased out anyway because it was not economically advantageous. But it's always economically advantageous because, I mean, if you're a big business, you care about the bottom line and money. You don't really care about people that much, right?
So then this is the doubt. This is the question of slavery. Then I mean, you could. So Brooke and I have touched on this too. You can basically raise the bar on what is slavery all the way to, going to a cubicle is slavery.
Yeah, I agree. A cubicle is slavery.
Yeah. even though you signed the contract, you went through the interview, you accepted the job, you get a paycheck with your name on it. All the paperwork they have is with your consent to say, I consent to basically these work conditions to live out my life working in this job, getting paid this wage.
Yeah, I would say as soon as you don't have agency over what you do and how much you work, and all of that is just getting delivered to an imaginary machine called a company, that's slavery, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And and honestly, cubicle work is in that definition. I think I'm in a slavery job right now, treating drug addicts, but it's still a slavery position.
I would call it occupational slavery, which would be different from institutional slavery. I
am working for an institution.
Where from when you're born, you're immediately like, okay, you work for me, you don't get any money, you can't leave here. You have absolutely zero say. Whereas now you have a lot more say compared to slaves.
Right.
Like slavery is
I don't know about that.
Like slavery is, well, how much do you can you quit your job tomorrow?
Yes, but you get basically what it is though is instead of you pick the cotton or you get whipped, it's now you do exactly what we say or you're a hobo, right?
But you basically, you've essentially consented to being in, you're in society right now. You're not going to go be a mountain man because.
Well, all the slaves consented because they didn't try to run away every day.
But
that's the same thing, isn't it? They should have tried to run away harder. That would have changed it. We're basically still on the plantation where we just get to pick which one we're working at.
Right.
Does that make sense? But it's still plantations at the end of the day.
Right. Okay. No, I can see that. So then it's all slavery, and we should all treat it as such when it comes to discussing.
Well, it's do you have the agency of your own labor and your own work, right? We're all here. We're all friends and supporters of Rich Cooper.
Get into some,
Rich Cooper has his own job or has his own company, right? He has full agency over all of that. When you become employed in the system we have now, you don't have agency over your work. You do what they tell you to do, or you get threatened with being fired. That's your job. Do exactly what they say, or you might get fired. You know what I mean?
So then it goes about how do you go about finding a job? Like your attitude towards if you're able to find a job.
No, that's the innate nature of a job, though, isn't it? All jobs, it doesn't matter if you're grilling burgers
you consent to a way to provide a good or service to then be exchanged for money.
Yeah. So as long as you're in the system, you're in that slavery, though.
So then are you kind of getting into the Marxist view of labor? Like you should be entitled to everything you do and complete agency?
Oh, no, because this is going to go into my Industrial Revolution stuff. And I I don't know how long we want to go into that, but I think just the so I'm definitely not a communist, but I'm also not a capitalist. I think they're both wrong. I think even introducing those is a problem, and we can go down that hole if we want to. But
right.
I think both of them serve the feminism left agenda. So
they could serve a lot of agendas beyond that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think because who buys stuff?
So would you say maybe we'll make
okay? No, it's not about who buys stuff. It's the sort of the environment of capitalism is essentially kind of like allows people to compete and work against each other, and it's the equivalent of now that men don't have to go out and hunt and be and such like we did when we were cavemen. We go out and we compete with each other for jobs and being corporate executives and making money and starting businesses and such. Like a huge
but I don't think that's innately human nature either. So let me just do my mini reason of what I'm saying this.
Right.
Let me get back on my train of thought for a sec. So
the CONK manifesto.
Yeah, wow. I need one. I probably got a couple in the back of my mind I need to put on paper. But if so, capitalism in its nature is based about supply and demand, right?
Right.
So in our current state, the people that have the demands is like 70 to 80% woman's choice, right?
Right.
And if you want to get into that supply, that means you have to appeal to the biggest group possible, which is women. So no matter what, over time, businesses will always still resort to the universal globalism women because more people equals more profit.
Right.
So that's why the more generic you can make your service and the more cutthroat you can make it, the more in the end it will further that side of politics. Does that make sense?
But that doesn't mean capitalism is inherently feminist leaning.
It has to be.
No,
it's collectivist leaning.
It doesn't. No. Well, it lean like capitalism in itself. Like you understand? Yeah, the basic definition of capitalism is just the.
Okay. Yeah. Let me be more. Okay, this is the thing, though. This is my big beef with capitalism. All right.
Yeah.
A machine doesn't do what it says it does. A machine does what it does. So there's a difference between saying what is the point and the ideal of capitalism versus what are the results of capitalism. I'm talking about the results of capitalism, not what capitalism says it does.
It doesn't mean this like but the results of that are a whole bunch of other factors too. Like it is. Like,
but I mean, you got to admit though, it's always going to lean. If you want big money, you need more people, and to get more people, you need a wider net. And it's always going to lead to globalism and collectivism, right?
But you also look at other countries that are more capitalistic than we are, that have slightly different breakdowns of like how they market to things, how their markets operate.
Yeah, but I mean, in its innate nature. When you're trying to be a company that makes money, you have to bend the knee, right? The audience and the customer has the frame in that transaction.
Right, and that's a good thing because we actually have affordable goods and we can actually have quality.
But who's the audience? That's what we're going to go back to. Who's the audience?
Whatever the society.
80% women.
Well, you change from 70 to 80%, but I get what
you're
saying.
It's in there, yeah. Everybody says something different because it's usually not the woman's money, but she makes the buying decisions, right? So people, how you choose that, it's in the 70s to 80s, or they are the lead decision makers on what's being purchased,
right?
Right, even if it's not necessarily their money.
Right, I get that.
Yeah. So if capitalism perpetuates itself through competition, that means only the ones that bend the knee survive and make the big bucks.
I think we've kind of gone off track with capitalism. We were talking about Applebee's.
Right?
And Applebee's serves the single soccer mom. That's what I've been preaching all day.
But, Yeah, this is this is the thing is just for me as a libertarian, I'm just not going to try to sit here and try to want to push the state one direction or the other when it comes to deciding on how other people's lives, because people go a little far with the whole instituting government to do things, but I think when it comes to these big issues where the consequences of, again, both the two directions, either the government is going to be seen as condoning condoning the murder, or the government is seen as condoning throwing people into jail and inquisitions for people who are in situations that they feel they need to get out of. So you create you create more, either you kill more fetuses or you imprison more people and ruin more lives as a result.
Well, my closing thoughts on this whole thing is, if the government's not good enough to protect literally the weak, voiceless, most innocent among us, helpless among us, what good are they for?
Amen. That's my point. Anarchy. That's my point.
Yeah,
and then again, so it's like, that's why it's like in this specific instance, I'm not going to let the government decide for me. I'm going to let people. So then the responsibility then rests with the people. Educate people and encourage people to be smart, make smarter decisions, to be more independent in their ability to prepare for these situations, whether it's to actually take care of the kid, practice safe, practice safe sex, don't have sex, don't do dumb things that lead to these decisions, or the government just comes in, because by defending it one way or the other, it's almost like a kind of welfare. Like, oh, big daddy government's going to come in and tell you, you can't make these decisions. We're going to throw people in jail for this. Or it comes in and says, well, I just say, don't. Like, I'm not going to use the ballot to force my will on you one way or the other. And then this is where it goes even further. The government has absolutely zero funding for anything regarding abortion.
Well, it has zero funding for anything ever, because it's everything the government does is off our backs. So,
yeah, I'm just saying. Well, yeah, I'm just saying. It's not just that they don't legislate it, but they don't even fund it, because you obviously have this Planned Parenthood problem. Like, the government is essentially has their hands in Planned Parenthood because they give them so much money that then in return comes back to their Democratic candidates. And it's like, what kind of nonsense corruption is that? So just cut it off completely. Planned Parenthood could go and be like, if Planned Parenthood wants to go off and be a private institution and do their own thing, and people want to use their services, yeah, I don't agree, but I'm not going to sit here I can't stop everybody. So I'd rather okay, and whether another organization or maybe Planned Parenthood decides, well, it's probably more economically viable to actually be educational, teach people how to make better decisions, because or because they're trying to stimulate demand, which is all these abortions, they might actually be like, yeah, be free to go. They might actually go further down the feminist agenda, but at least the government's hands will be free of it. But also the responsibility of teaching people to not be reckless and make decisions that lead to either abortions or whatever. It rests with the people.
Yeah,
it rests with people making their own decisions. I'm not, thinking of it this way. I can agree, someone killing someone else. That's a very clear thing. I'm not getting into the whole side of separate from abortion, people killing each other. That's the thing, because that's a really dangerous thing, because that person could actually kill me. Like, if there's a murderer in my town, he could actually kill me.
Mm-hmm.
But an abortionist is not going to kill me.
No, what if they change the terms to 200-month abortion?
Jesus. And that's so I'm just saying is it'd be like if CONK, you keep dropping the anarchy word.
Anarchy. I don't know what that means, but it sounds awesome. It's an old TikTok meme.
Let's just say hypothetically we're in a world where murder was completely and totally legal because there was no.
Well, everything's legal because there's no such thing as laws.
Yeah,
legal is not even a word that you would use in that world, right?
But let's say it just became so acceptable because of certain circumstances, like if it was like a post-apocalyptic world and the only source of food was people, or something.
Well, no, there's always food out there.
But you know what
I think you underestimate Mother Nature.
Culturally, murder became such a big thing, and then enough people got together and said, "We're going to form a government." But even like we're just going to organize, but we still like, well, yeah, but so many of us are so used to, used to killing and this that. Like, well, how would you? Well, we'll make it a fine. Like, you have to pay like a certain amount of your food over time. Okay, and then people kind of learn like, well, dang, I don't want to pay that fine. And then, but they're not going to say we're going to make, we used to believe that this was wrong. We're going to completely make it illegal. Well, so the consequences I can't really predict. But if it's like if you had someone step in, and like if there was a society that just murdered like crazy, and then you stepped in and said no more murder, I think people would do other crimes that would probably be worse.
Possibly, but I mean that's all hypothetical, right?
People would start mutilating animals and then depleting.
Why don't
the
we
food
find
supply.
out? Let's save some innocent lives and find out, and we'll deal with all that if and when it happens.
I just don't want the state to do it. I want the people to be free to make their own decisions and educate themselves. Like that, you need to learn your own lesson. Like, it's kind of like the whole thing with welfare. Well, all these people are gonna just have all these problems, so people aren't gonna step in and help people. Like, instead of forcing virtue on everyone, let virtue come of people's own free will.
We've been trying that since 1973, and we got 60 million deaths. I mean, that's been tried, and it's failed miserably. We're not going to have none of us are ever going to be able to collect Social Security because
here's the thing: before welfare came in as a result of the Great Depression, churches took care of a lot of that. Churches and fraternities took care of things like insurance and taking care of the market.
And then the New Deal came in and ruined the whole party.
No, and I will agree. I think like private charities and fraternities that used to exist that took care of most of the sort of the people that couldn't. That should totally be a thing. But I'm saying is then the state stepped in and completely took that over, and now the state is essentially going to.
Now it's screwed over. Yeah.
Now
everything they do is screwed over. Everything.
It's like well, I don't believe in welfare, so you don't want to help people. You want homeless people to die? No, of course not. I just don't want the government to. I don't want my money to be forcibly taken away from me to give to that because of the inherent problems. Well, you hate poor people then. You want poor people to die. See, I can use that same argument and say, you want. And it's like, no. I want people to make their own decisions to fund charities that actually are. Also,
insert mandatory face mask relevance.
Oh, Jesus. But you get what I'm saying, right? It's like I can argue against welfare and say I can argue for welfare and say you want poor people to die, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, also Heather just pointed it out, talking about, but people were starving. So this is something very interesting. I just want to point this out. It's not a knock on anybody, but in general, a man's version of evil is like an ideal of evil or an injustice or a lack of freedom. And usually the female's version of evil is suffering, right? Which is why the left and feminism and a lot of that stuff also usually appeals to those moral arguments, right? Because when you're in the female spectrum of thinking, or even the childlike spectrum of thinking, because childs usually went with women, their greatest evil is suffering, right? And they'll stop it at any cost, which includes giving up your freedoms because they just want it to stop. They want to be safe, right? But usually the male ideal that comes from like literally testosterone is that there's some actual evil oppressive force, right? And so that's why you're always getting these, these dichotomies of people like arguing at each other what's good and what's bad and what's good and what's evil, but they're thinking in completely different paradigms. Our version of evil is oppression and injustice. The other version of evil is just suffering. This doesn't feel good, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
And so the arguments then try to make you feel bad for your decision, not so much if there's an actual problem. So what I'm getting at is I can use the welfare argument in the same way that, Bobby, you're using the abortion argument and say you want poor people to die. You want to actually kill poor people. Bobby, you need to give me more money so I can feed poor people. Even though I might take, 10% of an ever-increasing amount of money for administrative costs, instead of you having the freedom to just give to a charity that is for sure going to give way more of that money to the poor person and actually help. Now the government comes in and creates this whole entire machine that barely functions and doesn't solve the problem. So in the same way, I don't want the government to step in and start to be the moral police of this very, unfortunate situation we're in right now, 50 years after Roe v. Wade. I want the people to be essentially be faced with their own decisions. Now that it'll still be legal, it will only be done through private institutions, but people will be like, "Oh crap."
Yeah. And
I pay for this. Legit pay for this now. And people
can you also see the distinction though between Amos and Bobby, between your guys' points? And that's something else I was trying to bring in too, was like one of us is talking about it from a morality standpoint, and one of us is talking about it from a oppression standpoint. Does that make sense?
Well, and here's why I think you see that contrast, because, and again, here's, from the Catholic perspective, you cannot divorce sex from morality. You can't. And I'll tell you why real quick. Because the act of sex itself is an inherently moral act, and this just shows how materialistic our society has become, to where I actually have to reiterate such a basic common sense point, which is sex, as good as it feels, as pleasurable as it is, as addicting as it is, as powerful as it is, all those good things associated with sex. Having said all that, inherently at its core, at its essence, it is an activity that's designed to make the people who are engaged in it parents. There's no other way to become a parent. I can't go to Home Depot or Costco and buy special materials to build a baby. Like, the only way to become a parent is through sex.
Just you wait.
Because of that, yeah, right. So because of that, and Dolly the llama doesn't count. What about cloning? But the thing is, Dolly the llama. You guys missed a little joke there. But so because sex is an inherently moral act, what the church calls it has those two elements of the unitive and the procreative. People are all about the unitive, but they forget about that procreative part, that an actual baby can come from all this pleasure we're having. And that's why the contraceptive, I look at abortion as a symptom of the contraceptive mentality that Pope Paul VI warned against all the way back in 1968 with Humani Vitae. He said that if widespread artificial contraception is practiced, that it's actually going to lead to an increase in abortions, not a decrease in abortions. And the reason why is because that contraceptive, secular, materialistic mentality, that utilitarian mentality of when it comes to the sexual act, that you're doing it only for the pleasure, all other consequences be damned. What ends up happening is, hold on. What ends up happening is, if a pregnancy occurs, you view that as something going right, when in actuality, something going wrong. When in actuality, something went right. Nature took its course. But once you separate sex from babies and you untwist that unitive and procreative, all of a sudden you see pregnancy as something that has to be fixed with an abortion.
So here's the thing. People are not. So you said consequences be damned. I just took away your ability to be free from consequence. Now the government it's not even touching it. Your consequences are your own to deal with.
Well,
now you are huh?
I don't think I follow you. Say that again. Help me.
I completely remove the government, because the government is not there to try to save you from your consequences anymore in this specific realm. So the government doesn't touch it because it's basically it's you can go both ways with it. The training wheels of this is no abortions. They're illegal because they're wrong.
Well, the government, here's the thing. The government can't save you per se from, just like the government can't save you from having your brains go through the windshield if you don't, wear your seatbelt. But they could write you a $180 ticket if they catch you not wearing one. In other words, all the government can do is put deterrence in place.
You can make a whole argument for that to basically say I have the freedom to mitigate my own risks when I'm driving a car. If I want to fly through a window if there's a car accident, that's on me. And in a way, while I'm saying like, hey, dude, like if I'm in a car with someone, dude, wear a seatbelt, just be safe, because I care.
True.
But if like a police officer straight up came up to him and sat there and like, dude, put on a seatbelt. What? Do you really care, or you just need to write me a ticket? Because when government is trying to sit there and babysit me and make decisions for me, you know, like you want to talk about like parenting and such. You're not going to you don't like a good parent is kind of like, okay, you know, you want to help obviously when like, you know, shit hits the fan. You want to help your kid, but you're not going to be there every single moment. Oh, you scraped your knee.
No, I get it. No, I get it. I don't believe in a nanny state either.
Or it's like, but then it's like, are you going to be like, unfortunately, some people's kids do bad things.
See, to me, that's too much of a.
Do you expect the parent to be there and like, hey, put that gun away?
Yeah, but Amos, here's the thing. That to me, that's fallacious conclusion. That to me, that's jumping to the other extreme. Like, okay, we should to believe that abortion should be outlawed is not the same thing as pushing for a nanny state. That's not at all what I'm saying, because I don't want a nanny state either. I don't want the government micromanaging.
But I'm saying anytime you give the government the ability to make that kind of decision for us, it inevitably turns into a nanny state. Because we said people can't be responsible with guns, so we are ever increasing gun laws to eventually somewhere down the line we're probably not going to have any freedoms to bear arms. Yeah, you have you know somewhere 200 years down the line. Yeah, you have a right to bear arms. Here's a knife. That's it.
Here's the thing.
You don't get guns. So why is it? You don't get anything.
So here's the thing. So why is it that a mother will go to prison for the rest of her life for drowning a baby that she regrets having, but she won't go to prison for killing that same baby? Why is that? Why the inconsistency?
Because this is the realm of touching on this that we've already defined. It is completely different separate from the conversation. There's a lot of, you know, you want to sit here and debate where is consciousness from. You got to leave that. I think leave that for philosophers. Because if two cells just clump like an immediate conception, here's the thing. So then now I can say, well, because when you open that door, you open that box to where life begins in the womb. I can basically say anything you do to that is completely your fault. If you smoke a cigarette, I will throw you into jail forever.
You mean
if she smoked a cigarette while pregnant, I then have every right to throw her into jail. Because you are taking away from the.
Because you could technically say that's child abuse, right?
That is child abuse.
If you're drinking or smoking or using,
or if you just eat like crap, or if you're fat, because fat. If you look into like the genetic fat side of being fat parents can actually like really affect a child's development. They actually have a higher tendency to then also be fat. Thyroid condition.
Welcome to my life. Welcome to.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like we should prosecute CONK's parents.
Yeah, and also the Baptist ministers they kept putting in potlucks.
Yeah, we should prosecute them too, and all the people that ever made him like eat the way he does. No offense, CONK, but you know it's like
how could he? If I would eat 10 beef burritos, that's my right as an American.
I mean, this is kind of the same thing when it comes to like these programs that try to tell people what you can and can't eat and what you should and shouldn't eat. Like the food pyramid is the biggest crock of crap there is. Really? 12 servings of bread? Like, are you crazy?
12 servings. Well, hey, why don't we do this? Because I got a hard exit I make like right around 10:30. Should we open up the line?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure people. Yeah, we've had some nice, quiet, casual topics.
Yeah, we had some nice going here. This was a hell of a ping pong.
All right, everyone.
Talking about killing babies and overthrowing capitalism. That's some nice little easy talks.
I've just branded CONK's philosophy. I think his economic philosophy. I think I'm going to call you a communapitalist. A communapitalist. That's what you are.
Well, I hate both of them. That's the point. Neither of them are solutions.
I'm going to just call it conkism.
Yeah, there you go. Well, there's a word for it, but it's controversial, so I won't say it.
You're a conquistador.
A conquistador. I'll take it.
I'll expand it off air.
You evil cultural appropriator, you.
Yeah, but it's also funny too because I actually grew up in Hispanic culture, so that admires to me well.
There's the
What's
man.
up, Tom?
Good morning.
Our
So,
fifth panelist.
yes, Bobby, I'm gonna miss you, man.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss you too, man. I'll still pop in. I'll still try to pop in a lot, but yeah, man, it was.
Go
it was
to
a
the
fun
Saturday Vigil Mass, bro.
run. That's a thought, but we'll see.
I mean, we need you on the panel. I don't know, like, I think you bring the contrast because you're practicing celibacy and abstinence. That even myself, I don't really bring that contrast anymore.
I appreciate that, man.
Tom, you don't know my penis's life and its agenda. You can't put that on it.
No, man, I think it applies. Like for abortion, I got a little bit more liberal. Oh, yeah, I got more liberal now that I'm not practicing abstinence because it's like you're actually facing the consequences. So I still think personhood's not attained at conception, but I think there's a difference between someone who's doing it from idealism and someone who's actually like experienced, like, wow, I have a pregnant woman, I have a baby coming, or I have a fetus developing. How do I feel about this kind of thing? Not to knock you. I think it's a good. Sure. I mean, that's what makes it not an echo chamber.
Right. No, I hear you. Well, that's interesting what you said, Tom. So I'm curious if you don't mind kind of exploring a little more what you said. So prior to, when you were practicing, what I would call it is practicing celibacy, like, or practicing chastity, actually. Like, we're all called to chastity, but depending on our vocation or state of life is how we live it out. So, for example, if you're married, the way to practice chastity, have as much sex as you want, just keep that unitive and procreative tied together, never untwist them. If you're single, pretty much the only way you can express your sexuality is to be married, like as far as to its fullness, having sex. But so let me ask you this. So when you were still, practicing chastity, did you believe in personhood then, or did you change that after you got off that path?
So I always thought it was problematic that the body naturally aborts fertilized eggs, like tons of them. And if we believe, because I studied, limbo, purgatory, we believe that it's just full of these babies that are just, how are they going to be raised in heaven? Like what's going to happen to these? So I always thought that was problematic. I guess we just lost CONK. Oh no.
We'll get CONK's P just went conked out.
He'll be back.
Yeah.
He'll be back.
So I think the first trimester is a good, because that's in British common law there was the quickening was this point of personhood that typically happens around the end of the first trimester when the mother feels the kick, and that was when they said that's when the soul was attached to the body, because bodies, even if we have advanced medical imaging and it looks really cool or it looks wow, it looks like little fingers, it's still just a body. As Christians, we have that theology that the body is not the soul. A body can be devoid of a soul. So that's why in British common law, the quickening was when the soul was attached, and that typically, when the mother felt that, was about 15 weeks or the first trimester.
So let me ask you this, Tom, then. And you're the one guy on this panel I could ask this, and you'll know exactly what I mean.
Okay.
So how do you read everything you just said into the incarnation? So when the Holy Spirit overshadowed the Blessed Mother and she gave her fiat, be it done unto me according to your word, she got impregnated with the word. What was in her womb? Who or what was in her womb?
Yeah, I mean that would have been Jesus, but that's lifeboat ethics. Like that's asking a question that's like, like also Joseph should have divorced her too, but that's an exception that, if anything, the exceptions prove the rule.
Well, what we're talking about is the question of ensoulment. That's the technical name the church would give it, is at what precise moment does ensoulment occur? And
so there's risk involved. Like God, in a sense, took a risk when Jesus was incarnated, and at various points, he could have sinned. He could have, been killed in the womb or these different things. There is a degree of risk involved.
That Jesus could have sinned?
Well, he was tempted.
Well, according
he was
it wasn't
still a human body that was
here's
that
the
was
thing though.
exposed to the same temptations as we
Yeah,
did.
but true, but in a different way though. Aquinas actually went into the temptation of Christ. I'll actually post the link. I got to get better on this.
It wouldn't be. I don't. But I'm saying is it wouldn't be real. Like how could
No, here's the
how
thing.
could the circumstances be different for him and not than the
I'll
ones
tell
for
you
us?
exactly how they're different for him because he's God in the flesh and we're not. That's the difference. In other words, God, the creator, did not become a creature, right? Every time when otherwise we're Arians, right? We're professing Arianism if we believe that Christ was a creature. He was not a creature. He was God made flesh.
He was creature and God.
Well, I would say that he was God who took on a created human nature, but at the core of his personhood was
But
a
if
divine.
that were true, then he would have shed his physical being when he ascended.
Not true. Not true at all. Because here's the thing. He had two natures, right? One was divine, one was human. It's kind of like this. His human nature is what cloaked his divinity, right? His humanity was the instrument of his divinity. So when it comes to the temptation of Christ, he wasn't tempted from a place of concupiscence because he was perfect. He was tempted for several reasons. First is it was part of our atonement. That was the first reason Aquinas went into is that part of our atonement.
How can he atone if he didn't go through the exact same life that we went through?
Well, here's the thing. Though. He went through the life. His life is the ideal of what we strive to have. In other words, his life was a preview of what we're going to have in heaven. So my thing, in other words, a life free of sin, right? My thing is this. So
are we going to be tempted in heaven? That was my first thought.
Well, let me finish though. Let me get you guys will understand it better if I can get these points out. So the first reason he was tempted was to atone. It was part of his passion. His passion didn't start on the cross. His passion started from the moment he was born. If you look at Christ's entire life, he had a pretty hard crash landing on planet Earth when he arrived. He had no inn to stay in. They had to flee to Egypt when he was a baby. He experienced poverty. I mean, there were all kinds of things he suffered for in our stead, on our behalf. So that was the first reason. Second reason was to actually prove that he had a human nature, because even if you have a perfect human nature, even a perfect sin-free human nature is capable of temptation. And we learned that from our first parents, right? But that's where they failed. So the third reason he was tempted was for our instruction, to teach us how to deal with temptation. How could he teach us to deliver us from temptation if he wasn't tempted himself and he didn't demonstrate for us how to be tempted? So St. John Chrysostom wrote an entire, here's me quoting the fathers again, he wrote an entire tractate on Christ's final prayer in the garden when he talked about, Father, take this cup from me. And he talked about how all of Christ's major teachings, all of his major commands, Christ lived out. So for example, when he taught us to love our enemies, he didn't just teach us through word how to love our enemies. He taught us through action how to love our enemies. When he prayed forgiveness for his executioners, right? He taught to deliver us from evil. That's why he prayed that night in the garden, Father, if it, let this cup pass from me. He prayed to be delivered from the danger of the cross. So all those examples is to say that Christ's temptation doesn't mean that he could have sinned, because he didn't have concupiscence. It just means that he identified with us as a merciful high priest, and he did have a perfect human nature that was capable of being tempted, but it wasn't capable of succumbing to the temptation because he was God in flesh.
We've actually got someone else in the stream here. If unless you have something real quick you want to add or ask, Tom.
Yeah, I kind of had some more ideas. We can't do like 5, maybe.
Bobby, do you have to go?
Actually, you know what? Let me hop off, guys, because I do have to go. But listen, guys, it was a great show. I love all you guys, and you crazy kids, you. But I'll check in though, guys. I won't be a stranger. I promise. All right, brother.
Cool.
Awesome.
Love you,
Bobby.
Love you guys. Bye.
Yeah. All right. Pants at half mast, gents, in respect.
Yeah. We've got Thug Life Bear.
What's up, man?
Can you hear us, man?
Hey.
There you go.
Going?
Yep.
Oh, Jesus.
That is what we're
hold on.
Yeah, we only opened 20 cans of worms today, so feel free to pick one.
Oh, jeez. You tapped into my wheelhouse when you mentioned the slavery would naturally get abolished due to economic reasons. It's in the Thomas Sowell book somewhere that they had to, they basically had to destroy like a fifth of their entire economy just to abolish slavery. In the long run, that it was going to work out well for them because slavery wasn't that profitable until the cotton gin was invented. But
right.
Yeah. But before that, you couldn't. I mean, I hear the argument, but I don't see how it could be anything other than like a moral crusade or a moral impetus to get rid of slavery. Because otherwise, you could never convince them to do any of that. So the British, they put all those patrol ships and stopped all of the slavery boats coming out of Africa.
Yeah, there would have been that. I mean, there's the other thing too, is if you look at like segregation and Jim Crow and all that stuff, there's an argument for that also being like economic. Like it was just way more money to make a separate water fountain, separate set of bathrooms, a partition in your restaurant, only for for colored, quote unquote. I'm not getting in trouble for saying that. Just like they had the separate thing. And a lot of the business owners were like, I just want one set of bathrooms to clean, one set of water fountains, and one set of like dining areas. And the upkeep, like you said, it was eventually realized that slavery wasn't that profitable in the US because of these inventions, but it was done before. So typically, like, this is the thing is like, what is the moral police that the U.S. gets to be? Is it just everything moral that we can get, just enough majority vote on that we just change it? Because then that goes into the sort of tyranny of the majority. Mm-hmm. Oh, if 51%, obviously the laws don't, it's not just 51%, but it can become like, 51% agree this, therefore that. The whole argument, and it's little tiring at times when I hear it. People are like, America's a democracy. Well, we have democratic processes, but we don't just like, 51% vote this, therefore it is. Like, if 51% basically said like, 51% voting did have done quite a few things in history, like, good and bad. You have enough people that basically agreed, like, hey, the majority of us agree that the British Empire is, kind of shitty, so let's leave. And then, the votes that took place for them to, lead to independence. But then 51% could also say, yeah, shit's really hitting the fan here, and there's this Austrian guy that's really good, and he's given some good speeches. I think we should make him our chancellor.
And spoiler alert, it's Emperor Palpatine. Unlimited power.
You will die. The other thing that I wanted to jump on before I forgot about it, but CONK mentioned, what was it? That the free market tends to lean in favor of women,
and collectivism in general, and globalism, all of those types of things.
Yeah,
because the more butts and seats, the more money they get.
Yeah, I wanted to revisit that because he's not necessarily wrong. We do know that most of the buying decisions are made by women. And we do know that if you leave things alone, the shopkeepers are always going to cater to what the people that buy their stuff are asking for. So if most of the buyers are female-leaning, then the shops are also going to be female-leaning. And the marketplace is going to end up being female-leaning. Mm-hmm. So
your men's Walmart is way smaller.
Theoretically, you could say that you could fix this problem by getting the men to buy more stuff. But where's that going to take us?
No. But we won't. It's in our nature to not do that.
Yeah, right? Why would I want some random corporation fixing my problems for me? That just makes me feel,
But at least the demand in place controls for that. It's not like the government's going to be like, okay, starting today, bigger gun sections in the store, It's like, why? Because we need to combat the feminism problem. I really wouldn't care. I'm like, I just, I would have like my group of people that I would like have reached to audience, be like, hey, I think guys should be like doing more manly stuff, and we should like go pursue those activities, and that would lead to like a local or just my community of people to be like, oh yeah, let's go buy guns, let's go do more camping stuff, let's buy cool cars and motorcycles or whatever. Like, let's do man stuff. Yeah. I'm not going to be like, hey, government, you better step in and change this.
Yeah, and I think one of the good evidences for that too is like even in regards to man purchases like guns or hardware tools or lawnmowers or those types of traditional things. They either don't have commercials or the commercials are to appeal to the wife on why she should buy that for her husband for Father's Day, right?
Yeah.
They're not really appealing for the men to buy it ever because that's not the market of the people who watch commercials and buy off them, right?
I think a better way of looking at it is more so like it's not so much just that the women make the decisions, but the women, like what they buy, I think is just as important too.
Yeah. Why do you think we put so much money into market research and product packaging and making it look pretty? Guys don't care. Well, I want it to be as easy to open and already assembled as it can.
I mean, if you flip the roles and guys were making most of the decisions, a lot of us would just go to like Walmart and Target. We're not going to go to these high-end places because we're just looking at the pure utility of our clothing. Oh, just some jeans, a t-shirt, and I mean, look at me here. I'm just wearing this like $8 graphic tee. I'm not going to go. Exactly.
Yeah, the whole world would be Costco and Bass Pro Shop.
Yeah. I mean, that's still not like I'm not gonna sit here like I mean, you might have like a handful of like Men's Warehouse to look really nice, but like you're not gonna have these places that are really appealing to like fashion in a sense is very much is in that way too. Is now men have this extra sort of tier of fashion because of this. Because of women, essentially. I mean, which makes sense, but it's like if men were making most of the buying decisions, we just have Walmarts everywhere, like more Walmarts.
See, I don't know. I think there's also an appeal to more local businesses as well,
right?
Because we like shopping at a place where we know the guy, right? Where you can actually talk shop instead of go to the cash register and wait.
Men are very extreme. They're either like minimalist or they're extremist. So they're going to have the bare minimum.
Yeah, that's the difference. Is men are more towards the extremes than women.
Yeah,
but anyways,
well, it's utilitarian at the end of the day, right?
Right.
We want utility and functionality over finesse.
So, and we're idealistic too. Most jobs are useless or worthless. Like even. Everyone's dream is you get the 6-figure job where you're browsing Facebook half the time, if you have to sit in the cubicle. And those exist, right? We all know people with those high-paying jobs where they just, they only do an hour of work every day. And so, yeah, automation is going to remove that. And we're going to need to have a strong concept of personhood and of the sanctity of human life, of the dignity of human life. Like we need the person to be held in high regard, but it's just not as I don't think it's as automatically assigned as the evangelical and also Catholic pro-life wants to make it. Like I said before, conception, there's tons of aborted eggs that are fertilized. But this is the other thing I wanted to bring up are the Bible verses, such as when King David celebrates dashing infants against the stone, infants of your enemy against the stone, or when God commands Israel to go and kill the Amalekites, the women and the children, and even the oxen. So
pulled an Anakin Skywalker.
They pulled it,
not just the men, but the women and the children too.
Yeah, they were sand people. So
yeah.
They don't have
too accurate for sand people.
Too accurate for sand people. Oh my goodness! Don't get me distracted.
It's gonna happen. Welcome.
Yes. The point is we're assigning personhood. Like this is the term that's used in these debates is personhood, right? Like we're assigning personhood, and that personhood then gives you the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And who assigns that personhood? Is it the state or is it even the mother? But it's just not this automatic thing that's just given to you as soon as the sperm hits the embryo. But like, do you guys have any like CONK? Like, don't you have like some kind of gut reaction to those Bible verses? Like, what's your commentary on those extreme verses in the Old Testament?
I would say, I think so. This I could talk about this a long time, so I'm trying to summarize it.
Yeah.
But essentially, the material world, like the end goal for Christians, and I think for God's ordained and everything like that, that the material world and the earth, and you could even argue the people, we're supposed to be indifference to, right? And when something's indifferent and it's a tool like a hammer or a screwdriver or something, it could be used for good or evil or things like that. But it's really, I mean, I talked about it a little bit, I think last week, where we talked about like our weapon is to be shrewd with worldly resources, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, I think that just doubles down on that technically, like, we should be indifferent to, and I hate the word should, I hate when I say it, but I mean, I think the ideal goal of the Christian life is to be indifferent to everything physical. It's not the big evil thing like Gnosticism, and it's not like a holier than thou kind of thing either. It's just, this is stuff. Our body is just meat bags, right? And so there's probably, if there's some purpose behind it of like, I mean, the end of the day, it's about souls, right? And it's about your spirit with God's spirit and all those kinds of things. And the world is just the world, right? And so that's why I don't really take any hard takes on you have to be celibate or you should be having raging orgies to be a man, right? It's really, I'm more indifferent on it, right? I don't think it should be as big of a deal as Christians like to make it out to be, right?
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. I'm more of a hedonist, I think, than you are, because I think the end goal is pleasure, and yeah, like I think the material world can distract us from the higher pleasures of the spiritual realm, and we see that when mystics have ecstasies or people are having these experiences that transcend even sex or even drugs, we see that there's a higher pleasure to be attained. And I think that leads, I kind of have a BDSM theodicy of suffering, right? Mm-hmm. So in BDSM, the suffering and the bondage is supposed to create a greater intimacy, which leads to like a more fruitful relationship. So the whipping and all the weird kinky stuff, the point is actually greater pleasure, even though it seems, savage or barbaric. And in the same way, I think, when Christ, you see him on that cross, but it's because of the joy set before him that he endured that cross, right? So, we go through these sufferings, but then it's when you get to this just like excessive suffering, and there's certainly instances where, there's unnecessary suffering or egregious levels of suffering that you want to step in. And that is a place where Planned Parenthood can come in, where contraceptive and different things come in, because you meet people and they have their kids and they're gonna say they love their kids. I'm sure they love their kids, but it was a miserable slog to raise them, and on the flip end of that, that could lead to criminals or just peons for manual labor or even for war. These are all things to be considered, other than this, like.
But I think it's also important to notice that, like, yes, like the peasants and the peons are indifferent, but so is the kings and the rulers and the presidents. They're also equally indifferent. So,
right.
I think that's a good point to point, because if you start taking it seriously about that, like, it's going to sound crazy, but pretty much the more you care about humanism and the more you care about the world, the closer you are to being an Epstein. So,
right. But the people who care, like, okay, I cared about abortion so much, but I was a virgin. I wasn't having sex. Just like, I wanted murderers when I was young to just kill. If they steal something, cut off their hand. Code of Haramai or whatever. If someone does a murderous activity, just automatically kill them too. An eye for an eye, kind of thing. And that comes from a place of you're not experienced. Now that for me, I'm having sex. I'm entering this world. I'm getting more nuanced. Also, my mom, the owner of the Catholic Church, like, she's very adamant against abortion, and she says life starts at conception. But it also happened that she had fertility problems, right? So she couldn't have as many kids as she wanted. And I also remember meeting a woman that's, going to become a nun who also had lesbian tendencies, and she had this strong stance. So it's very curious that the people who are so adamant, about this, it comes from a position of insulation that they're not going to really have to experience the consequences, or maybe like they couldn't have as many kids as they wanted. And I don't think that's as intellectually honest, as someone who's actually, risking pregnancy and having to raise a kid up to 18 and beyond.
Yeah, I think the farther down the road you get of like being able to be more intellectually mature, I guess is how I would put it. Like the more you're able to be more intellectually mature about these things, the more you'll realize like there really is no like genuine, this will sound bad, but there's no real genuine good and evil. It's all very gray. Everything is very gray area, and it's really just based on which perspective and which narrative you're looking at, right? Everybody's the good guy in their own story. Like,
right.
I don't think, I mean, unless you want to talk about really crazy extremes like Epstein or Hitler or whatever, they probably still thought in some sense that they were a good guy and they had bad guys out to get them, right?
Wouldn't you prefer it if we were the ones that were in charge of dictating what was good and bad versus someone else?
No.
I mean, let's say it's between secular Judeo-Christian values of good and evil versus globalist feminist style versions of good and evil. Wouldn't you prefer it if we were the ones in charge of dictating what was more right and wrong? Because otherwise, what they have in store is much worse than what we have in store.
Well, I think the issue isn't necessarily who's in charge, but the act of somebody being in charge is innately a problem. That's my issue. Is humans aren't like, so have you ever heard of Dunbar's number? And we should probably wrap it up after this. Because we were going, I think we're like an hour and 45 minutes in, but
yeah.
Have you ever heard of
Yeah, I know what it is. Dunbar's number is basically 150 something people.
Yeah.
Oh, I know this concept.
Basically, it's like that's the limit of the amount of people in your life that you can have any real meaningful connections with. Anything beyond it, it's like a passing acquaintance or less, pretty much.
It'd be nice if morality was dictated around our biological limits. So that's
what I'm saying.
To be nice to 150 people.
So when you're talking about somebody to rule the world or to be the government over 300 million people, it will never go well because you can only empathize with 100 to 150 people. Everyone else is a number, right?
Yeah.
And how you readjust the numbers, somebody's going to have a lot of suffering and death, one side or the other, depending on how you balance the numbers. So I'm saying the whole system's fucked and nobody can run it. That's my point.
Anarchy.
Suppose you wanted to like build your government around like a more biologically orientated morality. You'd say, well, Congress, the limit of people in Congress should be 150. The limit of
no. The limit of the population of a town or governing body of the population should be 150. That's what I'm saying.
But even maybe not as strict as 150, but I think even
in the ballpark, yeah.
Wouldn't you just get invaded by a next door neighbor with 152 population? Like,
Right. But I mean, this is where this is sort of the argument. Like, we have certain ways that are definitely trying to mitigate that type of idea, like states' rights. Counties being free to make their own decisions, and federal government trying to limit it and stuff like that. But it's tough to kind of work that out. Like like when it comes to the anarchy thing, like I can, I used to be very much like a lot more in the anarcho-capitalist kind of side of things, but then as I kind of thought more and more, it's like
it doesn't work.
Well, yeah. Essentially, like groups of people inevitably will form governments again. You could completely remove all the institutions of government, all the buildings, all the structures, even all the history. Like you can just like if somehow we reset to zero, but we had all the knowledge we still had, but we just had no like books, structures, anything.
Yeah.
we would inevitably just get together and be like, hey, there's about 200 of us here. Let's get together and agree on these things. We'll protect each other. We have people that protect, people that feed, people that do these things, and eventually get big enough. Okay, some people can afford to actually pursue certain things that are not so utility based, utilitarian with what we have to do. And then you go further and further, and the next thing you know, 1,000 years down the line, nation states are back again.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, because if the world is run by the market, and okay, we'll end after this for sure. But if the world is run by the market, and I mean, you could even see this right now with the race to AI and the singularity, right? Once one section gets so big and gets to a certain checkpoint, they automatically rule everything else. So when you do ANCAP, you're still going to inevitably lead to like totalitarian communism because somebody's going to have all of the resources because they had that one amount of money or that one amount of power that completely shut out everyone else and became a monopoly on everything, right? So that's why I don't believe in ANCAP. But all right. Let's call it a night, or it feels like night. We've been talking.
Closing thoughts. I mean, literally 30-second closing thought, guys. Tom?
I think closing thought, but in future study, I want to look at what happens at abortion clinics when, like you hear about masses are being held and women cancel their abortions. So I want to look into that more to see what's going on with that, even like miraculous things that allegedly happen. But that's as a closing thought, as a future endeavor.
Cool.
That'd be cool.
Thug Life Bear.
Okay, issue by issue. I don't think the British Empire could have ever abolished slavery without a serious moral impetus by maybe a small Christian lobby inside Westminster. I don't think it's possible for you to care about yourself without a little bit of materialist inclinations to care about your own body. I do think that the market tends to lean too much in favor of women, but without changing the way men behave, which is they don't buy that much stuff, it's naturally going to incline that way anyway. 3 thoughts.
Yeah, that's fine. CONK.
Yeah, I would say, like, bringing it into the whole religion zero, what is the Christian relationship with all of these topics we brought up? And for me, I think the Christian ideal life would be that indifference and that realizing at the end of the day, like, society has always been downhill since the Garden of Eden, right? And, you read Ecclesiastes, there's nothing new under the sun. Everything that's come up has already happened. And so we might have different flavors with each different generation of how evil and corruption and messed up everything is. But at the end of the day, it's always been evil. It's always been corrupt. It's always been messed up, right? So I think as Christians, we're not really called to create giant radical political revolution or get involved in politics and trying to fix it, because it won't fix anything. This is just the way the world is, right?
Sounds a bit too French for me, yeah.
Yeah. And so I think the Christian goal is use what you got, right? Well, we were born into this generation for a reason. You use what you got, be shrewd, find what resources you can get, what you can give away, what you can acquire. How can you manipulate that to do, God's will for you and your mission, right? So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's fun to talk all of this stuff, but we're not going to fix anything. It's always going to be like this until the world burns.
Yeah. Or Jesus comes back.
Or he already did in 72 AD.
Preterist. Okay.
I don't know. I'm open to it. I don't really care about Revelation. So.
Closing thoughts.
All right, Avis.
Yeah. I mean, the big thing is really just, I think, again, interesting. Sorry. It kind of goes back. I'm sticking to just I'm sticking to kind of what I was talking about in the beginning. It was just, I think, like, it's good to have, like, moral fabric and having, like, societies that operate with, agreeing upon, like, moral things. But unfortunately, like, when you go to I tend, like, the more I kind of, like, thought through and worked through these things, the more I become more pragmatic in my views, and I kind of have to, like, you want to go have your society and be, have these things that you see as illegal or things you agree you don't do in that society. But when the society gets so darn big, like 300 million plus millions of people just across different countries, like you need to really look at it a pragmatic way of how laws go about it. And I think freedom tends to, the libertarian view of just government doesn't touch these things tends to be kind of like the best way to go about it. Granted, there's certain things people are going to agree upon, like, actual murder, actually like, breaching people's freedoms, but we're all still figuring it out. It's funny. Like here we are, we have these societies where we're living these great lives, but there's still a lot of problems. So we're all trying to figure it out. But thanks everyone for joining us. I know this is a little bit longer show. We thought we were going to do a short show because we're just like send out, Brooke come on, send off Bobby, and that's where we're going to be done. But we're having way longer discussions. So thanks everyone for joining us. Of course, we will see everyone next week on whose channel? I don't know. We'll figure it out. We'll let everyone know. So we'll see you guys
play
next
by
week.
ear. And hopefully